All
All right.
right. Good morning, everyone. It is Agencies Talk Friday again. We are joined with President Mark de Grasse. We're hanging out and chatting about all things agency and all things digital. This week, we are joined by Adrian Boysel, founder and CEO of Instagraphics.com, a mentor to web, graphic, and motion designers that want to thrive in their wealth, health, and relationships. Adrian creates the Instagraphics Pro Network, a community for creatives to grow professionally and personally with educational content and live training. Welcome, Adrian.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Hey, Adrian. So just so everybody knows, Adrian has a very interesting backstory, and we'll cover a little bit. This is not like a bio, but I think it's important that people know where you came from, kind of how your agency developed, and kind of just the whole backstory of how you started and got into the biz in the first place.
Absolutely. So it started as a self-taught graphic designer at the young age of 17 years old. It was kind of a hobby at like 16, but at 17 kind of started taking it seriously and met a mentor, and he was like, dude, this is what you should be doing. So made a little bit of a pivot because I was, on my own already at that age. And so pivoted just a little bit into doing printing and design because that was a really natural upsell. Ended up scaling that business to very quickly to a multiple six-figure a year business by just having a retail brick and mortar. People would come in, sit down with me, and I would design right there in front of them as I would listen to their stories, hear what their pains, their wins, and just hear about their life. And I would translate that across their designs. And I really delivered an experience that was really memorable for them and kind of caught fire here in my local area. And I ended up getting the honor of being able to help over 3,000 people in 2.5 years. So that was exciting. And then I got bought out by a former boss of mine and thought I was going to continue to run the company, but had to learn some hard lessons. And then I was like, all right, well, now what's next for me? So I decided to go off to Chicago and learn from Google because they had classes going on out there. And that's when I learned the Google Ads platform. And I had already brought in web developers and SEO guys. So I knew a lot about that stuff, kind of had stacked those skills already. And then I added the advertising on top of it. And that's where everything really started to shift for me once I was able to drive traffic and create really compelling messages and just learn about the traffic side. I thought, man, this is the future. This is where it's at. So started doing consulting, had an incredible amount of success working in the home improvement space, taking a company from 800,000 a year to 22 million in just a couple of years. And that was like a whirlwind. And then decided to open up my own brick and mortar agency when they were very slow at paying me, that home improvement company. So I decided, all right, time to go open my own agency. Opened that with my little brother and went through a lot of hills and valleys of learning how to run an agency. That was really stressful and went through some personal stuff at that time, even my personal life, and had to take a step back and go, all right, either I'm going to give this thing up or I'm going to delegate this out and hand this off to 2 integrators because I know that I'm a visionary. I'm going to go hand this off to 2 integrators who can take this business and actually integrate all of my ideas and visions and dreams for what I want to do with this. And it worked. It's still been some ups and downs throughout the journey because it's, very technical, very challenging business to be in, but it worked. And so last year was my first 7-figure year. I've done a ton of coaching, mentorship, speaking, mastermind groups, you name it. I've pretty much done it. I'll be at RTA Syndicate Live with Ed and Andy Frisella coming up. So just a lot of personal development and growth and business growth and just as much mastery as I can. And then obviously doing lots and lots and lots and lots of reading.
Nice. Well, I mean, you said a ton of stuff in there, but I think, just from agency owners that I've talked to a lot, the distinction you made between being the creative, driver behind the business versus the integrators that can take your vision, execute it, do all the boring operational stuff. I'm just kidding. It's all important work. But how did you kind of realize that that was your role? And was it a hard transition to go from that and hand off these important components, or how did that work out?
What's funny is even though the guy that had bought my business was not a very good business partner and not a very nice person, he said some things to me that were laced in truth. And the truth was that the place that I belonged was sharing the strategies, sharing the tactics, sharing all the things that I learned from stacking all these different skills and doing a lot. I mean, I did so much integration. I was the integration. It was me wearing all the hats in the very beginning of my business to build what I built. But at a certain point, he realized, and I had to realize, that where I best fit was sharing that vision and being able to teach and sell. And sales was the most amount of money I could generate for the company. That was the highest revenue generating activity that I could do for my company. So I was resistant to that because I'm like, no, I'm a designer. I'm an artist. What got us here was my art and my design and my skills and my talent. And then I had to, over years of bumping my head against the wall and learning the hard way, I started to realize more and more and more as I kept hitting these income ceilings and wanting to try to break through of, all right, I'm standing in the way. The more time I do design and the less I do graphics, the more money we're going to make, you know? So I decided to shift that into focusing on sales, getting on stages, getting on radio shows, started my own radio show, doing podcasts. And so I started to see the proof was in the pudding over a long time horizon. And then eventually I was just like, you know, I think it was about 2 years ago, I was like, we're going to fully make the switch. I'm not going to do any integration unless it's something that I personally like have my heart want to do, like for my wife's company or one of my businesses. It's the only time I do design now is something that I want to do for myself. And so I've had to make that transition slowly, but a lot of books helped me. Reading books like Traction, that was a huge deal for me. It just kind of solidified and validated, all right, I'm doing the right thing. I have 2 integrators. I'm the visionary. This works out exactly the way I need it to. And this is why we're making the progress that we need to make.
Oh, it's amazing. Well, and I know we actually talked about this on the podcast, but could you kind of walk through how you found the integrators? Because that's everybody wants an integrator, because everybody, you know, most agency owners you talk to love strategy, and it's the fun part and connecting with the clients and building that relationship, which is actually what makes the money. But we do get roped into doing this, and you found 2 integrators, which is incredible. How did you do that?
Yeah. So at the very beginning, I had a really close friend of mine who was in the mortgage industry, and she was working in the mortgage industry and the car business. And I'd known her and become really good friends with her and her husband. And her husband was looking for work, and he contacted me about coming to work for me. And he was just not in a place in his mental health to really do the job. And I got on the phone with her, and I'm like, she's like, how's it going? And I'm like, not great, not great. And she's like, I'm like, what I need is you, Amanda. And I just knew it was just something in my gut. I was like, what I need is you. She's not an extrovert. She's not outgoing. She's a freaking hard worker. I knew she busts her butt. I knew she was super smart. She had a lot of success in her career. And I'm like, I had this gut feeling. So I listened to that gut feeling, and I'm like, I need you. And so a couple of months later, she calls me back. She's like, I'm ready to leave the car business. She was like running one of their front desks in their service department. I'm like, I need you. So she jumped on board with me, and I would call her on my way to my consulting gigs in the morning. I'd be like, hey, I need this, and this. And she's like, cool. I'd go down the whole list with her. And then she'd call me back 2 hours later. It's all done. Now what? And I'm like, oh, okay. Now I need this, and this. She's like, okay, cool. That's done. Now what? And I'm like, oh my gosh. So we just kept doing that day after day, and it started to compound, and we started to see the results 3, 6, 9 months down the road. And after about 6 months of that, I was like, all right, it's time for me to just focus just on the agency again. I'm not going to do the consulting, which was kind of silly, but I'm going to focus my attention away from the consulting and help continue to build this agency and focus on the vision of that. And we just started building. And then we got to the point where like I was doing some of the websites, and we were kind of piecemealing some of the websites that we were doing. And I'm like, we need to go find another web designer. And so we went out and searched for a web designer. And that's when we found Chris, who was another introvert, highly technical, highly experienced in digital marketing, had his degree, went to college for it, like just knew web design inside out and backwards, and had done a lot of work with Jupyter themes, had developed all the Jupyter themes through Elementor. And so I was like, this is exactly what we need. So we brought him on board, and then he was just like, dude, I'm going to come behind you. I just want to make you look good in every way possible. Everything that I can do, I got you. You're basically like the product. So we're going to go out. Amanda and I are going to go out and push you as hard as we can. And I'm like, sweet. And that's what they did. Every project that I brought in, every deal I did, they put their heads down and they went to work, and they weren't trying to step into the visionary role. They just let me lead. And that was a really nice change, because I had other people that worked for me in the past that thought that they knew it all because they watched 4 episodes of The Prophet, and they wanted to lead the company, and they wanted to tell me everything I was doing wrong. So that was a really refreshing feeling to have 2 people that they trusted me and my leadership. And so that was a really neat and humbling experience for sure.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I think it really. Oh, go ahead.
And now they're partners. I made them each equal partners with me. They're not.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I'm not a majority partner. They're equal partners.
That's so cool. Well, and I think that's a huge, bold step to take too. And I mean, everything you've done is kind of highlighted that. Like you have to be confident with your decision. Now, I think it's these people just appeared like magic. They didn't, because you had been in business for years. Did you kind of build a profile in your head of like, okay, this is the type of person who can be an integrator?
So what's cool, and I mentioned about coaches and mentors, I had hired a sales trainer right before all this, and I had hired a business coach. And my sales trainer was actually a guy that I worked with when I was in the car business years and years and years previous. And I asked him to help me kind of do an analysis on my team. And so he did a disc test on Amanda, Chris, me, and I think I had 2 other people with us at the time that were just people on our team. And we did a disc test on everybody. And it just confirmed what I had already felt in my gut. My gut was telling me that they were the integrators. Amanda's a steady and a compliant. Chris is a dominant, but also a steady. And so they had these unique personalities that fit very well with my personality. I'm a high I, right? Informer, and then the driver. And so it really worked well with my personality type. So I was kind of able to validate it with that. And now when I bring people onto the team, the disc test, the Myers-Briggs, all those things I like to do to be able to really get a full understanding of who that person is, what makes them tick, what are their motivators, what are their strengths, and what are their weaknesses.
No, that's awesome. Did you have any cases of trying to build, bring in an integrator and it didn't work out, or were these the kind of big first steps you took after you felt comfortable with the process?
I think before them, I'd built up my agency with my brother, and I didn't really know quite what I was doing and know the agency world quite as well. And I brought in graphic designers to kind of take over my position. And I thought, well, I'm going to go hire graphic designers that are like from colleges and highly skilled and have all the education, because then I can learn from them. I'm self-taught, so maybe I could pick up some of the stuff that they're learning in school and just sharpen my axe even more. I have the natural raw talent for design. I'm not a college educated one. I just figured out design. I know what looks great and I know what doesn't, and I'll just keep building on that. And so I thought, okay, this is going to be awesome. And then I hired, probably over the course of 2 years, I probably hired 10 graphic designers from colleges, and not one of them worked out. Not one. Yeah. It's like, let me work on my mood boards. I'm like, cool. And then like 4 days later, I'm like, so where are we at on this logo? And they're like, oh, I'm still working on the mood boards. And I'm like, dude, I would have had 2 logo design projects done by now. 2, at least 2, so it was just the speed of which they moved just was not nimble enough for how I started my business. You got to remember, I came from a retail, sit down, let's design it right now, whether your logo, your business card, your flyers, and you're going to walk out today with a finished product. You're not leaving here till it's done. Right. And so I have this completely different, quick, that's where Instagraphics comes from. I have this quick, get your stuff done, listen to who they are, translate it across the design, and have the confidence to be able to design right in front of them. And then boom, they're off and you're on to the next project. So that was kind of the challenging part for me, is I had such a different approach to how I designed for people. And I had to learn how to transition and kind of slow my process down to kind of accommodate some of these college people. And it just wasn't working out for me until I kind of realize some of the fundamentals that I needed to shift within an agency.
No, it's, I would think it's actually, Christina was talking about that. Just your process that you went through is very similar, where you work in the business, work on your business, work on yourself, and then you work in your zone of genius. So I think it's all part of the process. Cause I think a lot of people just feel bad about like, why haven't I figured this out? Why don't I have a magic integrator that could just take my ideas and run with it? And it's really, really hard. And you do have to have a lot of self-awareness to be like, I'm going to stop doing this thing that I've thought was a complete necessity for the last decade of my life.
That's right.
Stop it. Like that's, courageous. It's a tough thing to do.
Definitely. I'm looking at some of the questions here. The background, I got that on Amazon. I want to make sure.
Yeah, they're pretty cheap. They're the plastic ones.
The plastic ones, yeah. Takes a long time to put them all up because you got to put like little pieces of double-sided tape on each. There's like 20 pieces on the back of each one of these. So it takes a while.
Actually, I got the ones that are like octagon soundproofing panels, and they say like, oh no, you just need the spray glue and blah, blah, blah. And that does not work at all. Just so everybody knows. If you get the fabric ones, all you have to do is use a staple gun. And then it's like 2 staples, you're done, and it won't fall off. So
yeah.
Little side note.
That was my first background that I did.
Oh, was it the octagon panels? Yeah. We did it in the back, and I would come in the next day, and then like half of them would have come off the wall and pulled the rest off. And then it was like a huge process. Let's see. AI. There's a LinkedIn extension that analyzes people's profile and gives you tips on how to talk to them. Oh, that's interesting.
That is really interesting.
I would. So actually, Tasha, if you want to unmute yourself, I'm interested in that, because we're talking about relationship building, so it actually kind of fits with what we're doing.
Yeah. I think we even did a podcast about it. But it was kind of this. It was that's how I did my DISC personality test. Was through Crystal, because you can go to their website and do it too. But they actually have a Chrome extension where you can where when you turn it on and then you go to a LinkedIn profile, it'll like pop up with a sidebar that has like all their crystal information, and then like it works well for like interviews or whatever. I can put a link to the podcast and it could.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
it'll help. But
Do you
yeah.
know the name of it? Wired to
Crystal
Perform?
AI.
Oh, Crystal
There's
AI.
a link to it on the podcast page. I can give it to you too.
Yeah, do it.
So
That's
many-
actually, that's super useful.
Yeah, isn't it? It's a little disturbing, Christine, it seems on some level, but also, don't you want to be talked to in the way that actually works? Everybody hates when like somebody's like doesn't quite understand them, right?
Oh,
nice
yeah.
to
Well,
feel
it's,
understood.
I think if you can understand people's perspective and, you know, be like, I know you're this type, it'd be interesting if he
be
gave you a
respectful.
warning. Get away from this part. Stay away from this one. Like, oh my
LinkedIn is
God.
such
That
a
would be interesting. I don't think it does that, but I think you have to determine that.
No, that's super helpful though. And I think well, let's talk about that, Adrian, you know, in terms of building the relationships between you and your team. So I know that's a process, and you as a creative, somebody who's done everything, the tendency is always going to be to do everything yourself. And then, you know, and that gets very restrictive for the people you train, because then they don't feel like they could take ownership of what they're building and blah, blah. Could you walk through the process of how you kind of bring in somebody who's very capable and have them do what you need them to do, but also still give them the freedom to innovate?
Yeah, I think the freedom to innovate, one of my highest core values, just me as a person, is freedom. Anytime there's restrictions and you try to put me in a box, I want to knock the box down. So I wanted to build a company that where people went to work with me, it was a company that I wanted to work at. And so I don't micromanage people. I don't give them, you know, these really harsh deadlines and any of that. Like, I have expectations. We use a project management system. Zoho runs our whole company. Essentially, our whole agency is run on Zoho. And so we do put deadlines on the projects, but I'm not bugging them throughout the process going, hey, I expect them to take accountability for themselves, and I hold them in account for their abilities, not their inabilities. And I think that's a really important part of one of the lessons that I learned early on, is like, they're going to look to me and I'm going to set the pace. I'm going to set the example. So I was working alongside them every day in my office. And so they were seeing how hard I was working and what I was pushing and where I was going. And there was just constant communication. I love that. There was constant communication between all of us. There literally was a huddle every single day. Like, to be honest, twice a week, we would pray together. I had a conference room at the front of my building, and I would bring everybody into the conference room. We put on some worship music, and, you know, kind of low, and somebody could be walking around the room however they felt, they just what was best for them to pray and for them to spend time, even if they weren't the praying type, just to have a moment of quiet and peace, and just getting together as a team like that, and just having a moment to give our hearts and our minds to something that was bigger than ourselves, I think was a really big part of my culture. And culture, I think, is something that a lot of creatives really struggle to build inside of their companies, because they don't understand that culture is something you build daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly. There's activities and things that you want to create within your company for just culture alone. I had a mentor that taught me this. He's like, dude, literally culture is like a pillar within your business. He's like, it's not just some like fancy thing that we talk about to try to like pump people up. This is literally like HR. Culture is its own department within your business, and you should have deliverables and things that you're doing on a regular basis. So what are you doing now? And I'm like, nothing, you know, other than just being me. You know, I have my natural culture of who I am. So that was a really big deal for me to start to try to incorporate different factors into my business that created more culture, a positive culture of accountability, like, you know, working out. Like, hey, we're going to stop here in an hour, and all the guys, because I have all guys here in this office with me, and we're going to do 50 push-ups real quick. And then at lunchtime, we're going to do another 50 push-ups. Just working together as a cohesive team all the time was a really big deal. And then just using the systems that I had in place, Zoho, project management, Click, right? All these different things that Zoho offers, using those tools at their highest ability possible between sales, operations, finance, fulfillment, and marketing, right? And making it very cohesive across them. That was a really big deal for me. So I think just using the right systems, being the right leader. If you're expecting people, like, one of the things I learned from my mentor, Nicholas Bayerly, is when we do these mastermind retreats and we're going to go do the ice bath, who do you think the first person to get in the ice bath is?
Oh yeah, that's be you.
No, it's him.
Oh, it's him.
He's
Oh,
the
okay, I was
person.
gonna say,
He's
put the leader in there first.
He's the leader of the group. He's the one getting in there first. Who's the one that's going hardcore on the workouts, harder than anybody else in the group? Him, right? He's setting the pace for every single person in the group in every area. You know, if there's another speaker that he brought into his event, he's just not sitting there just listening to the speaker going, oh, that's cool. He's like taking notes, and he's like, cool, I got 4 pages of notes. How many pages of notes do you guys have? Right. And he's always setting the bar. And so that's just the way that I wanted to live and work and be, is just no one's going to outwork me. No one's going to show up the way that I'm going to show up. And I want other people to see that. And that's going to be contagious. And it's really worked for me.
Oh, I like that. Well, and I think the, you know, those regular kind of activities make a huge difference. Now, I think the main thing that agencies face today is that there's a lot of outsourcing, there's a lot of remote working, and building the culture when you're not together and can't say like, it would maybe not even the same time zone a lot of the times. Do you have any recommendations for how to kind of, you know, build that culture piece if you don't actually see anybody in person?
That's more challenging if it's over Zoom or if it's remote. If you're having, you know, outsourced workers, it's really hard to do that. Again, it goes back to the systems. If you have good systems in place, and there are ways to do that. This right here, doing a Facebook group with your team and having a weekly team meeting. So every Monday morning with my team now, I have half my team, actually more like 3/4 of my team is here in the US. And then I have about 5 or 6 people that are overseas, a couple of them in the Philippines, one in Bangladesh. So I have a couple people that are outsourced. But those people are on my Monday morning calls, and we start every single call, every person that speaks, because every person speaks that are on those calls, they turn their cameras on. It's a requirement. And we do 3 things. Tell me what you're grateful for today. And it can't be the same thing you told me last time. What was your one win last week that you're like super excited and super proud of? And what's one win that you want to accomplish this week? So we did that week after week after week for about the last 3 years. And then we're like, all right, this is getting a little mundane. Let's try to mix it up and change some things. What's one thing about the agency that you think could use help? What's one resource that you could need? So just always trying to mix it up. We have consistency, but then we sprinkle in some stuff along the way to try to mix it up and create some different stuff. And then we'll change the order. So sometimes I go last and sometimes I go first, you know, so it just really depends, and not trying to make it so routine that it's boring and they're like, oh great, another Monday morning meeting, right? Let me get a TPS report for you. So I think that's an important element of what I've done.
No, I like that. You know, it goes back to systems, and then that consistency makes a big difference. Actually, Christina, if you want to unmute yourself, you could just ask your question.
I like this question a lot.
Yeah, so it's like I'm going through something similar where like I do live website builds with people, and like I can do an entire website start to finish. And I think the fastest one was like 3.5 hours of doing all the design, all the copywriting, all the strategy for the Howard, like the whole thing.
I'm at 4.
So like,
but
yeah, so it's like if you could go back to like past you, and as you're going through that process of starting to step out of the design stuff, which is where your superpower was, like, what do you wish you would have known? What tips would you be like, okay, past you, we're going to be like doing this. We're not going to be an idiot about it this go round, you know?
I hate to say this, but it's a hard truth that I had to learn. I had a lot of limiting beliefs around money, and it wasn't until I read Secrets of the Millionaire Mind that things really started to shift for me around that. And I started asking people who I know were nowhere near as talented in their graphic design career as I was, as far as their skill set. And I asked them what they were making, you know, other agency owners, other web designers, and I asked them what they're making. They were paying themselves twice what I was paying myself. And I'm like, all right, there's something wrong here. Right. So I had a lot of limiting beliefs around money. And I think majority of society has limiting beliefs around money. And that's why majority of society is where they're at today. And so a good example I can use to answer this question is a quick story. Recently, I had a client that came to me and was like, man, we've gone to all these different logo companies, agencies, branding companies, and we've had 2 or 3 different logos done. None of them we've liked. We spent over $25K. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what'd you just say? How much? And they're like, $25K. I'm like, $25K to develop. I'm like, what do you have? And they showed me the logos. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe this is what you got for $25K. Like they literally pulled this off of Adobe stock or worse. They're just fonts with like an apple on it. Like this is unacceptable. So I was like, this is the kind of brand that needs to be a hand-drawn, handwritten styled logo. I could do it. But it would probably take me maybe 5-6 hours to do. And is that really where my time is best spent? This client is a very important client. He's been helping my wife and her business. He's a local guy in my community. Like, I really feel like there's a personal attachment here. And everything in me was like, do the logo. And I'm like, all right, if I can serve this client at the highest level possible, what is the best thing that I can do for them? And so instantly almost in that I was sitting right here in this spot. And I thought to myself, I know my buddy David, was in my graphic design goats video that I did, who does hand-drawn lettering and logos. I put him in that video and he freaking was stoked about it. I bet you I could contact him and he could do the logo and he would knock it out of the park. Like he could do a better job than I can. And so I was like, let me hit him up. So I hit him up and I'm like, hey man, what would you charge me to do this logo? And he's like, oh, like $1,500. And I was like, what? 1,500? And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I quoted the client 5,500. Client was like, yeah, no problem. That's a little expensive, but that's cool. And I'm like, oh, by the way, this guy that did your logo is the lead designer for Lucky Brand. And he's like, what? He's like, oh, are you serious? I'm like, yep. He goes, oh, no problem. So it pays me the $5,500. I send the 1,500 over to David. He knocks it out of the park, but I'm like, it's still not quite there yet. I think I could probably do something to make this even better. So I took the E that was just kind of like a little swooped E, actually it was this way. And I was like, if I flipped that upside down and put a little tail on it, there's the A, because the A didn't match the E. And so I was like, let me just do that. So I changed the A on it. I made a couple little tweaks to the lettering. I adjusted some of the kerning and boom, I sent it over to him and he was like, dude, no revisions, no changes, no nothing. And in about 2 weeks, that logo, 2 to 3 weeks, that logo was complete. And it's one of the best logos we've ever created. I have it blasted across all my websites now, called Garden of Eden. And the lesson in that for me was hire somebody that's as good as you, if not better, and pay them what they're asking. I didn't negotiate with them. I didn't ask them to do it for 1,200 or can you do it for 1,000? And I just paid him what it was worth. And I upsold it for a little over 3 times that. And it was a great deal for us. I spent maybe an hour and a half on that project. So it's projects like that that reaffirm and validate that I have the vision. I'm not the integrator and I need to stay in my lane. And I got the opportunity to incorporate a little bit of my talent and my skill set and my eye on that logo. So there is my personality and fingerprint on it. So it was a win-win for everybody.
Well, and I love that it sounds like, oh, are you being greedy by doing 5,500? But, your value is actually identifying like, okay, here's what this client needs. Here's this awesome person for my network. I'm going to pay them what they ask for. And the gravy is what the skill set that you've built up over 20 years of doing this crap, where it's like, no, that's what it's worth.
Well, he paid 25 grand to not get the result that he wanted. So he spent 5,500.
Greedy would have been like, I'll do it for 20.
Yeah, exactly. And so now he got the result.
Less than the other guy.
He got something beyond the result that he wanted. Now he actually has a story to tell. When people go, wow, your logo is amazing. How did that happen? Who did that? Oh, the lead designer for Lucky Brand did that in this agency that I hired in town. Oh, who was that? Right. So give your clients a story to tell. What you're doing there with building websites in front of people, that is an experience and a story to tell. It's not just the actual website and the service that you're providing. It's the experience.
Well, and I will say, because I still do. I haven't done many because I've been completely slammed, but that's what I did with anybody who still wants a website. Where I'll say like, okay, I'll do your website. I don't have time for this, so we're going to do it from 9 to 1 on Saturday, and we're going to finish it. Or either way, we're going to be done. So you're going to have to pay me. So get ready because it's going to be intense. But even the ability to do that, I think is a, kind of a master level skill set where you're like, I could do this for you. It's not even worth how much money I would have to charge you to do it, because I have other people who could do it better, or me just doing this one component of your business isn't worth it. You should have this other agency who will take it and then they'll run with your campaign and do all these other things is a better use of everybody's time.
Yeah. I mean, at $5,500 even, right? If I were to spend 10 hours doing that logo, that's $10,000 in consulting work I would be getting versus $5,500 in design work.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make logical. The numbers just don't add up.
No, that is an excellent point. Let's see. Question for Adrian. If you go back, oh no, you already did that one. I feel like there's another one. Is there another question, Michelle?
I thought there was
or
one.
Bonnie? It was at the beginning.
I need to link up.
I didn't see one. I saw some good comments,
Yeah.
but not necessarily any questions.
Well, let's talk about your, niching is always something we talk about, and there's always this comparison between, your niche agency versus your full stack agency.
Yeah.
What would you consider yourself, and do you have recommendations for how agency owners should position themselves in there?
Yeah. I think this is a really big area that a lot of agencies struggle with, is that they're probably told by many people, many training, many programs and courses and all these different places. Everywhere you turn, it's like niche down, niche down, niche down. You got to find your niche, right? But some people don't have an experience in one specific vertical. Some people have experience in a lot of different verticals, and they don't really have a preference towards one or the other. And for me, I went and bumping my head. I'm like, okay, I've done so much work. I have a huge track record. I've had so much success with contractors. I'm just going to go into contractors. And then I started doing that. And the more contractors I brought on, the more challenged my life became personally, the more drained I became. And I was like, I can't stand working with these people. They're just inconsistent. They 1 week they're excited and telling you you're the best thing ever. The next week they're pissed and yelling at you over the phone. And it's just all over the place with these guys. And so maybe I'll just go after lawyers. Lawyers are great. Also comes with its own set of challenges, right? Every industry, every niche has its own set of challenges. But as far as for me personally, what I found to be the most authentic to me, what I cared about most was, what is the state of the heart of that person? Who are they? What is it that's waking them up out of bed every day? What is it that's getting them to go out and build these businesses, build these brands, put the risk out there, carry the load and the weight that it takes to carry other people and employees and payroll and workers' comp and all these different things that businesses have to carry, and all the overhead? Like, what is it that's making them do that? And for me, we talked about this on the show, on the podcast. It wasn't a demographic at all. It was a psychographic. I knew that the people I wanted to help had some sort of cause behind their brand, whether it was at-risk youth, whether it was police officers, fallen police officers, burned firefighters. I've done a lot of work over the years with Firefighters Burn Institute, like anybody that has some sort of social impact mission behind their brand. The Be Great Show is a social impact TV show that I'm a producer for. I went to Florida and received an award for the work I've done with humanitarian work. Actually, it's sitting right here, So like anybody that has a cause behind their brand, that's the person I want to get behind and cheerlead and support and help bring them clarity and do all the amazing things that I have the ability to do. I don't really care about one industry, but there is a truth to niching down into an industry, because learning curves for any agency owner and really any business owner in general is the enemy of your business. It slows down your progress. It slows down you being able to scale. And so I needed to flatten the learning curves. But the reality is I'm 15 years in. I kind of paid my dues. I got through all those learning curves. I kind of did it the hard way. And now it's kind of like someone's like, hey, lift this 100-pound weight in this new industry. I'm like, that's not really like 100 pounds to me. That feels more like 50, right? It's like half the weight that would feel to other people, because I've just done so many industries. I had a smog shop that literally had 2 smogs a week coming in, and I scaled them up to 30 a day, right? Whole unique and completely different industry. I've done automotive, I've done finances, I've done attorneys, I've done contractors, I've done every service-based business you could possibly imagine. So after 5,000 clients, I've kind of understand that there's one framework that I've developed for marketing and one framework I've developed for branding that applies to any business. And it really has to do with the people that are in that business. It's really not about the service they're providing. And it's kind of a universal thing for me. So once I kind of figured that out, I'm like, I can do any niche. I can work with anybody. And don't get me wrong, I think niches are important. And I do have niche products and websites and assets that I own. So I use part of my revenue that I make in my agency, and I kick that over to passively revenue generating assets. So I have NorCalEnduro.com. It's a motocross website for the Northern California area, because NorCal is huge for motocross. This is where crusty demons of dirt and all the motocross guys, freestyle motocross, all that was kind of birthed here in Northern California. So I bought that brand off of a website for $5,000 that came with every design, all the social media accounts, over 20,000 followers. I bought the whole thing for $5,000 on a marketplace. And I took my team, my web design team, had them revamp the website, do a bunch of new designs. I did about 10 new designs myself that are super cool. And then we put them up. Oh, now we're driving traffic from Instagram, from some ads. And that's a print on demand website. I don't fulfill anything. I literally did the designs, upload them to the site, and then everything is done. I don't have to do anything. So I'm doing a lot of niche stuff like that. But as far as working for other clients in specific niches and only doing that niche, that just doesn't work for me.
Oh, well, I would say you do have a niche, but it has to do with the relationship and the motivation of the individual client versus an industry or anything like that. So it's sort of niche. I think going full stack, if you said full stack, and I'll serve anybody and I'll do anything, and the restriction that those people have usually is just money. Like, can you pay? All right, we'll play. That's
right, exactly.
You can play on, which isn't bad. I mean, you always have that. But no, I really like how you focus on the relationship side, which is actually long term. That's the only thing that matters.
Yep.
Because you could get all the performance for somebody in the world, but they could still hate you and fire you in an instant if
Oh,
you do
yeah.
something.
It's a pretty thankless job. I think I told you about this. You do all this work for them. You come up with their vision, their strategy, their brand, their website, their messaging, like everything that makes them successful. And then in 6 months or 12 months, they forget that you are the one that helped them get that success. And then it's their success. Oh, I did this, right? And then you no longer become as important to them from that perspective. And then they go, well, somebody comes in behind you and goes, oh, I'll do that for you. And I could do it better. And I'll do it for $1,000 a month less. And they're like, oh, well, see ya. And then the next thing you know, you're getting your cancellation. You're like, dude, I just worked for the last year, 6 months, 9 months, whatever, to build this relationship with you, for you to just go bounce out now because you got some success and you think you're going to do something better else. Okay, the grass isn't greener always on the other side. Here you go. And so that's kind of the big thing for me that kind of just forced me. I was like, I'm either going to get out of the agency world or I'm going to do something different. And that's when I was like, the psychographic is what the niche is for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see, Christina, you want to just ask your questions? You have a couple?
Well, I mean, they're not exactly mine, but there was some stuff that came up in the agency SIG that a lot of us agency owners were kind of bouncing around that it'd be good to get some additional insights and perspective on.
Definitely.
One of them was around like bad fit clients, for example. Like, I mean, you mentioned what a good fit client is, but like, how do you avoid the problem clients, the trouble clients that you don't want to let in?
So I think having a really good process as far as your initial, who's the gatekeeper they're going to and what are the questions you're asking. So we do an initial discovery call, but they don't even get to the discovery call without filling out some information in advance. So they go to my website, they click one of my forms, they have to fill out the basic form. They get an email saying, hey, thanks for inquiring with us. Go ahead and fill out this form. If they don't fill out that form, they're not that serious. So I don't even meet with those people. Once they fill out the form, and it's a really easy form to fill out, we're just asking for a little bit more qualifying information. What's your budget? Do you have money to invest now, in 6 months? And we ask some more qualifying questions to get an idea, which then I look at before I even get on the phone. We do our discovery call, which I say is a 15-minute discovery call. And on that call, I'm asking them 3 questions. What is your vision? What are your roadblocks? And what's your 12-month goal? That reveals a lot to me. Once I can understand where they want to go, what's stopping them, and what are the road, like what's their 12-month goal, like how fast, what their expectations are of getting there, that kind of gives me a lot of information to go off of. One of the big questions that a lot of marketing agencies are afraid to ask is, what is your budget, right? That's like the question. Everybody hates to ask what's your budget because they think it's going to be used against them. That's actually one of my favorite questions to ask, because that's one of my biggest ways to find out if I'm dealing with a nightmare client. Hey, what's your marketing budget right now? Oh, I don't have one. And I go, this is going to be a lot of work. All right. Well, first of all, you're not ready to be one of my clients on the agency side because you haven't even established your marketing budget. Do you know what your lifetime value is of one of your clients? Oh, no. Okay. Well, what we need to do first, do you have a marketing plan? No, I don't have a marketing plan. Okay. How do you feel about your brand? Do you feel like your brand represents you like at the highest level possible that it could be? No. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not sure if you did the research or saw this on my website, but I handle the vision and the strategy, or my team handles the integration and the fulfillment. What I can do is I will develop a marketing plan. We'll develop your marketing budget. We'll clarify and perfect your brand. And I can go through and do this whole process with you. It's going to take about a month. Is that something you have an interest in or a budget for? Well, what's it cost? It just really depends. What do you think like something like that costs? Oh, I don't know. I mean, maybe it costs, $5 or 10 grand. Actually, you're pretty close. It's in about that $5,000 to $10,000 range. If you do the marketing plan and the brand strategy with me, depending on which brand strategy program we do, it can run up to 15 grand. So 15 to 5 grand is about the range that you should be in to get your foundation laid for your business. And it's going to give you a lot of actionable information. So you're not just throwing stuff at the wall and hoping that it sticks. And they go, wow, that makes so much sense. I'm like, yeah, you go ask all your competitors if they have a marketing plan. I guarantee you they're going to tell you no. They're just throwing something at the wall and hoping that it sticks. Is that a good way to invest your money, or is that considered probably more of an expense? And they're like, yeah, that's expensive. I said, what I do here is about investing. It's not about expenses. I said, I should be able to turn $1 that you give me into $3, $5, or $10 down the road, but I can't do that without having a marketing plan. And they go, oh, okay, I'm ready to do this. Let's go. Right. And so I'm able to weed out those people by asking the right questions.
I love everything about that. We'll have to put that into an article, because it's like, hey, avoid the problems, just do this one thing. Let's see, as you start handing off the workload, how do you handle when mistakes happen and you have to step in?
That's a hard one. So I think it was in a book called, it was either this one here, Entree Leadership, or it was, it may have been How to Win Friends and Influence People. I've read so many books at this point. It's hard to keep track of all the gold nuggets that I have in my head and where I've gotten them from. But the compliment sandwich, has anybody ever heard of the compliment sandwich?
Mm-hmm.
So that's always my main approach. Hey, man, I love working with you. It's so awesome to be able to collaborate. Like the fact that we can have this conversation right now is so exciting to me. Are you open for some coaching? Are you open for some feedback? And they're like, yeah, listen, I've been doing this a long time. I think this is a great start, but I see there's an opportunity here that I just personally see. Can I share that with you? Yeah, for sure. Like, I just don't think that this was really done at the right level. I think this could have been done. Whatever the criticism is, I'll share that criticism as feedback. It's not criticism, it's feedback. This is just some feedback. You can take and do with it what you want. But I really think that you have the potential to reach this point, and we're just not quite there. So let's just take an extra time. How much more time do you think you need to be able to spend on this to get this thing really where you want it to be? Like, are you proud of this? And they're like, yeah, I mean, I thought it was good, but I wanted to get your opinion. Well, here's my opinion. I think that we could probably put a little bit more time into it and really hit it out of the park. Do we want to do good or do we want to do great? Oh, I want to do great. All right, well, let's do great. Let's put an extra, let's just say 2 hours into this. And then when you're ready, just come to me, let me know. We can have another conversation about it. Awesome, right? And then I'll be like, by the way, thanks for taking the extra time. Thanks for hearing me. Thanks for being so open-minded and coachable, right? And then you finish it off with the compliment again, right? Chris Voss, with the mastermind class that he does on masterclass.com, one of the best trainings, one of the best, Never Split the Difference, his book is just game changing, and his masterclass is absolutely game changing. When it comes to working with people and having conversations, negotiation and sales is in every aspect of our life. And all that was, when you're trying to give somebody criticism, is a negotiation, right? And so being able to understand that and leveling up that skill is going to be huge for every agency owner here.
Love that. It sounds so simple because probably the majority of business owners have heard that, but then it's like, I got to get this done, and actually you taking it over is probably the worst approach, because then it invalidates their work, shows that you're willing to step in and take over if they screw up, and then lack of job security and everything that leads to people leaving.
Something there that turned the criticism into room for improvement. That's actually funny, because that mentor that I mentioned, not a mentor, the guy that bought my business that I mentioned, that was one of the things he says, Adrian, every crisis brings you opportunity. And I'm like, well, you screaming at me to the point where your nose starts bleeding doesn't really come across as an opportunity for me. So I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Opportunity for you to stay alive.
Great knowledge, but not applied really the way that it could be. So let's try that.
That is the worst, because you do talk to people who know all of these things, and then they'll take a concept that actually is very good and they'll twist it into something that's horrible. And then it'll be like, yeah. And since everybody knows the compliment sandwich, it's hard not to still be influenced by it. But if you could identify it and then realize, like, oh, those compliments don't mean anything, even once it gets in the middle. Just skip the bread.
Yeah, skip the bread. Just tell me the hard stuff. And that's my business partner, Chris, in my business, because he's an integrator and he's not an extrovert and he's not the warm and fuzzy guy. He's like, I don't like the way you did that. You need to change it. It's not up to speed. And I'm like, like, dude, come on, a little bit of sugar, please, just a little sugar. So he's gotten better. He's like, okay, I'll take your word for it. I'm like, oh God. All right. It's pretty funny.
All right. Last question from Christina. You have, do you create packages of your work that you sell, or is everything custom? Pros and cons of both?
Everything is packages for me. Programs, not even packages, but programs. I have a program that I take people through that I've developed. You have to develop your own method, your own frameworks that you'll see all the influence. This is what digital marketers done. Their entire business is built on frameworks, right? All the knowledge that they're sharing they didn't come up with it. It's how they packaged it. They created an incredibly influensive brand. They package it up with their own methodologies. They put amazing people with amazing stories behind it. And they said, boom, here you go. And they drew people to it. They didn't have to push the rope. They pulled the rope. They led everybody to them. And they did it by having their own methodologies. That applies to any business. And if you read The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes, education-based marketing is the most proven, unbeatable, game-changing marketing strategy you could possibly apply to any business, any brand. If you incorporate this into your clients, you're going to find more success. You incorporate this in your own business, you're going to find more success. I educate everybody on what I do completely for free, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on stuff. I haven't held anything back from you guys. Not one thing. Stuff that there was even a few things that I said, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud right now. Because this is stuff like what I do, how I do my discovery calls. Like that stuff is my secret sauce. Those are the secrets like Russell Brunson talks about. Like that is stuff that I've used to make literally millions of dollars. But I give it away because what does that do? It builds the credibility. It builds the relationship with all of you. Hopefully Christina and I can do something together, right? It builds something that most people are afraid to go out and share and be vulnerable and give away the good stuff. But the good stuff is what's going to get other people traction. When you get other people traction, just like Alex Hermosi's doing right now, he's just giving it all away. Same thing that I'm doing. Just give it all away, educate the market, help rising tides raise all ships. I'm in the water too. We're all in this together. And so I think just having that team, that industry mentality of like, it's not just me versus you. We're not competitors. We're all working towards the same thing, the same goal. We want to make the world a better place. We want to live our best life. So that's just the way I look at life and the way I look at people and how I do business.
I love that. Well, and I think that transparency with everything that you do pre-educates your clients because they know what you do. They can look it all up. Now, if they try to do it themselves without your help, it might be possible, but it's going to be 10 times less efficient than hiring you. So
it's the learning curve again.
There you go.
Yep.
But everybody wins at the end. And I think that's the best part because I think there's nothing worse than because we all have frameworks. And I think Ryan, when you see Ryan on stage, he'll say stuff like, and here's who I got this from, and here's who I blah, blah, blah. And it's crediting everybody. So now those people will support your brand too, even though you could technically be competitors because who cares? We're all competitors. There's plenty of people. We don't have to get greedy.
Like 7 billion people on the planet. I don't think there's a shortage of customers out there for us.
No, but it is funny because a lot of competitors will focus so much on their competitors than they will on, themselves or their clients. And
it's important to know them and to see what they're doing and to take some of the success that they're having and find the clues in that. But worrying about them or like anything, just put your head down and get to work. Like just keep doing the hard, boring work. As I've heard a few people say, I think it's really important. But Manny says in there, Amanda Holmes just released the new version of that book. That is the case. I'm actually on the early release list. I think I may either have it coming or like that.
How big is that bookshelf next to you?
It's not big enough. I have a whole nother like 8-foot long bookshelf at my house full of books. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's not big enough. And then I do audiobooks too. So I have probably 110 audiobooks in my Audible account.
That is awesome. Let's see, Christina had one more. Do you ever get pushback from clients that packages or programs aren't tailored to their needs, or is that a flag that they are a bad fit client?
I haven't had anybody. I've had people want to like custom tailor some of my programs. Like, well, I don't need the stationery in this branding package. Okay, cool. Then you know what I can do? I can just put that towards maybe doing a door hanger or maybe doing a flyer for you or maybe doing a mailer for you. Or, hey, do you have a trade show booth? No. Hey, why don't we design you a trade show booth? That would be cool for you, right? Oh, that would be so awesome, right? I'll just sub it for something else. So, and I'll just usually do something that even has even more value, and that'll shut them up real quick. If they're still nitpicking, that is not the client for me, and that can definitely be a red flag for sure.
I love that. Well, I've actually used too, like, oh, that's great. Then we'll get the project done faster. And then
that's a good idea.
Save time. You don't even have to replace it with something.
That's right.
Let's see. And you never know if wait, I thought you had one more, Christina. We have time for one more question. Does anybody have a question? Work for them. Oh yeah. Okay, make that meme. Add more value and shut them up real quick. That is a good one. I think I will do. I'll make that graphic right now while we're talking. No, that's awesome.
I do love reading books. I used to be a kind of a bookworm when I was in elementary school as a kid with like Goosebumps books and all that stuff.
I remember Goosebumps.
And then
what was the scary one? There was Goosebumps, and then there was the scarier version of Goosebumps, which was maybe Scary Stories or
Scary Stories. Yeah, that
black and white stick
crypt guy.
Yes.
Whatever. Yeah. That one was pretty creepy. So that love for those kind of books, the fiction books, was a big deal in my childhood. But as I got to be about 12, 13, 14, I just kind of fell away from books. And then I was working doing construction at 12, 13, 14 years old for my uncles. My uncle's like, hey, remember, readers are leaders and leaders are readers. And I'm like, all right. And that stuck with me. I remembered that. And so at about 16, 17 years old, and when I got into some trouble at 18, I started reading books again, started reading Donald Trump books and Robert Kiyosaki books and just anything I could get my hands on. And things really started to move. One of the big ones was, what's it called? Oh my gosh, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill's book. That one was like, oh, wow, okay. There's a bigger game to play here. And then Tim Ferriss's book, that was another big one for me.
4 Hour Work Week.
4 Hour Work Week. Yeah, I got that one sitting right here. If nobody's read that one, just
it's funny because there's some concepts in there that I always like disagree with, but then there's a few that are just like, oh, that's gold. So
well, you got to chew up the meat and spit out the bones. I think you take what works for you, and there's always a gold nugget in every single book. Like the fact that the books sell for this one, like here, $24, like there's hundreds of thousands of dollars in knowledge. This book has millions. I will make millions. I'm gonna say it again. I will make millions of dollars off of this book. Millions. This book will make me millions with an M, potentially billions. Who knows?
Is that the book of the
EOS
day?
Entrepreneur Operating System.
No. I mean, like, what would you if somebody could only read one book?
Ooh,
what book would it be?
Aside from the Bible,
this is for their marketing, for enhancing their marketing business.
For enhancing their marketing, probably Ultimate Sales Machine.
Ultimate Sales Machine.
Yeah, Contagious is a really great book. That one was really fun to read, but it's really insightful to learn that virality methodology and formula. But Ultimate Sales Machine, there's just nothing more proven than that method.
That's awesome. Well, I will tell everybody, like, one of my personal evaluation methods for people who read is like, what's your one recommendation? Because it actually tells you a ton about the person. Like, if anybody wants to know, when I was at On It, and this was Aubrey Marcus, his book that it was the number one read was the Rules of Power. And if you read that book, well, be careful with it because it's kind of horrific. If you look, it's Machiavellian. Yeah, it's but it told me a lot about his leadership, and so that was interesting.
Wow. Let's see here. The walking quote machine. That's hilarious.
Actually, we should do that. We could evaluate all the certified partners by saying, like, what's your one book, and they'll tell. But everybody knows the trick, so everybody forget what I just said, because when I ask you, I want the real answer.
Pig-headed determination and discipline. Look at that. He's got that right down in there. I love that.
That's awesome. Well, I think we're about out of time. Where can people connect with you, Adrian, and find out more about what you do?
I'm easy. Either Instagram or Facebook. You can just type in my name, Adrian Boysel, at Adrian Boysel. I have another handle at Mr. Boysel, MrBoysel. And then I have a website, adrianboysel.com, ADRIAN Boysel, BOYSEL.com. That's like my personal consulting website, where I'm consulting in vision and strategy and stuff like that. And then the implementation site is adrianagency.com.
Awesome. Well, we did just do a podcast, so that podcast will probably be up by next week, and then we'll blow it up because you talk about a ton of awesome stuff in there. So that's a really good episode.
For sure. I appreciate the opportunity. This has been fun. It's good to see all the smiling faces.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I think your story is amazing. Just so everybody knows, the story is a lot more complicated than he discussed here, but we just went deeper into it during the podcast, and you'll see Adrian around because he's coming to Certified Partner Training Day in December, and he'll be one of our speakers. So get all of the questions ready for him and harass him during the show.
There you go. Keep looking up.
All right. See you guys. Tune in next week. We got, actually, Bonnie, who do we have next week?
Ryan Stewart.
Nice. So don't miss that. We'll put up all the details for that today.
Yes, that is
maybe
correct.
The next few weeks. It's going to be good. All right. Thanks, y'all.
Bye, everyone.